All right. We are back for the first time in a while. We are back for the Small Business Hour. We apologize for the gap in our recordings, but over the last couple of weeks, Ben and Tim came out to Oklahoma and visited me. We spent some time, a little bit of time working, a lot of time playing golf. We went to the final Bedlam because I'm an Oklahoma State graduate, and we had a great time because we have eternal scoreboard on OU now. Now, just like many of the fans thought, it seems that my Cowboys thought that the season ended when we beat OU because we laid a complete egg this past weekend against UCF. But that's okay because we have eternal scoreboard on OU. In other news, we wanted to get back to talking about the issues in the world that are going to affect or impact small business leaders out there. So that's what we're going to do today. But quickly, just curiosity, Ben, Tim, any takeaways from your trip out to Oklahoma or anything that's been going on over the last couple of weeks? Anything you guys want to share?
Yeah, I think the obviously goes without saying, the trip was a blast. We had a fun time working with our marketing guys as well, just doing some recordings for website videos, some shorts, just kind of showcasing some of our offerings as Brewster Consulting Group. So that was a lot of fun getting to know those guys a little bit more and play golf with them too. Just a great time to be able to bring the team together. This was the first time that our entire team had actually been together. I think, Kade, you said that, but to reiterate it, really cool just to bring everyone together and just kind of hang out, shoot the breeze for a little bit, but also really work on some productive stuff while we were there. So great time overall. We almost missed our flight coming in, or we did actually miss our flight coming into Tulsa, but fortunately the gate lady was able to very quickly put us on another flight. So we didn't miss our golf that very first day. So shout out to the gate lady there in Atlanta airport helping us out. Appreciate that.
And we got delayed, what was it, about 2 hours on the way back.
Oh, yeah, that was even worse.
Yeah. We, for some reason in Atlanta, they decided not to give us a plane, so we had to get a fresh one. Well, we made it home. That's what matters, even if it was 2 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, no, things I learned, at the football game, I learned that Cade's a crier. I learned not to indulge in certain types of beverages too much, yeah, I think that's the main takeaways for the
Main
event for
takeaways
me.
that you had? Perfect. That's good. Yeah.
That and went 2-0 in competition for golf, so that was pretty good. I think as did Kade. Tim went 1-1.
I went 2-0 because Ben was my partner. Let's be real.
Yeah, there's that for sure. Let's just talk about our shortest drives. I think I won that
due
contest.
to my own. Yeah, it wasn't due to my own capabilities.
It was riding on the shoulders of our partners.
That's pretty much the trip in the summary for me. Oh, and I made a good friend with Cade's dog Hank. Made a good friend there. Didn't make any other friends on the trip, but just Hank.
Hank misses Ben for sure. So, all right. So it was a great trip. We had a great time. Kind of, being out of the office with the trip for a few days and then kind of trying to catch up from being out of the office led to a little bit of a delay in us recording this, but we're back at it. We just each brought one article today or one item that we want to discuss with the group and get a feel for it as we get back into the saddle. So, Tim, I'll let you start us off. What do you got for us today that you think small business leaders out there need to think about or know about?
Yeah, awesome. I've got an article that I wanted to discuss. I took the angle this time of thinking about, what's on the horizon for Brewster Consulting Group and what are we going to do about it, right? So what's on the horizon for us, we're continuing to grow. And ideally what that will mean is when we're at the point where we can continue to expand our team, investing in talent acquisition is going to be really our next step. And as a small business, I'm sure those of you who are listening can appreciate this. As a small business, you have to make the right hires whenever you are small because the people that you bring on whenever you are so small really have a tremendous impact, either positive or negative, on your business depending on your size, right? So I read an article that I thought was really worth bringing up. It was on LinkedIn. It was published actually a little bit earlier on this year, but it was titled "Top Talent Acquisition Strategies for Small and Medium Sized Businesses." So it goes into a little bit of the stats regarding just where folks are finding their employees. And nowadays it's actually pretty sweet. If you're on the job hunt, you have so many different resources at your fingertips to be able to find work. You've got like freelancing opportunities through sites like Upwork. You've obviously got full-time employment that you can go out and submit resumes and interview for and things like that. And this article kind of summarized all of that, but then specifically for small and medium-sized businesses, touched on the key strategies that SMBs can use to really attract talent, to make sure that as you bring new talent in, you're making the right decision, especially as an SMB where, again, these hires make such a tremendous impact for your business. So first thing that they talk about was, I thought this was really interesting, investing in employer branding. So in order to draw talent to your organization, obviously you need to have a brand that's reputable, right? People should, if they don't recognize it, should at least feel as though it's professional, right? If they take a look at your website, if they read some articles that you posted or blog posts or listen to some videos, they should get the sense that you obviously know what you're talking about, right? I thought that was interesting that they led with that. Before I get into the other few items here, I'm interested in you guys' take on, that being the first thing that a LinkedIn article titled "Top Strategies for SMBs to be able to bring in talent acquisition." I'm interested to hear if you guys are as surprised as I am by that, and why or why not.
That like branding is one of the top
Is the top thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it is a little surprising to me. I think let me gather my thoughts for a little bit. So I think if you're going to go work for a small business, you do want to feel comfortable. It's a risk, right? You guys know that. Like, you guys work with us, right? When you go work for a small business, especially if it's relatively new, there's risk associated with that maybe doesn't exist with larger firms, right? Now, it's not like there aren't layoffs and things like that. Larger firms don't fail. Like, there's still risk associated with that. There's never an environment where you have no risk, but there is a little bit more risk when you work for a smaller firm. So I think some branding, like a little bit of a sense of legitimacy, feeling like your business is legitimate, resilient, like has staying power, is going to make people more comfortable. But I also think, like, to me, I mean, you guys would be more equipped to answer this probably because you chose to come work for a small business. But when I started this, one of the reasons that appealed to me is like the benefits of working for a small business are flexibility, work-life balance, opportunities, right? Like the ability not only to learn, but to end up in positions, if the business succeeds, that are much higher level than you would have got to that quickly if you were in a larger business climbing the corporate ladder, right? And so there's a lot of opportunities like that in kind of the entrepreneurial aspect of a smaller business that I think is important. So yeah, if you want to attract good talent as a small business, you probably aren't going to compete on pay for the most part with like a $1 billion+ company, right? If you're going after the same talent as them, you may be able to match, but you probably can't compete on benefits. And then even if you do like match them on both pay and benefits, then it's a question of like, okay, but all things being equal, why should they choose the small business over the security of like the larger business? And so you need that branding to really talk up like what the opportunities are, right? Like you'll have an opportunity for this talent to be in a higher level position in 3 years than they could ever be climbing the corporate ladder, or they'll have more flexible work-life balance. They'll work really hard, but they'll also be able to kind of do what they want and not be restricted by the 3 weeks of vacation every year and only a few holidays or whatever, right? Like, like I don't care. I'm tooting my own horn here, but like, I don't care if you guys take off an afternoon and go play golf or go do something, as long as we're being effective as a business. And, there's a lot of major corporate organizations that aren't going to give that level of flexibility. So it surprises me that that's like a top thing, but I guess like
Yeah.
it makes sense in the sense of like, if you can't compete on security, and
Mhm.
probably at best you're going to break even on pay and or benefits, then you've got to have other advantages that would convince
Mhm.
people to come work for you instead of a more secure, larger company. And so talking up those benefits via your branding makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, totally. For what it's worth, I think number 4 on the list was offering a comprehensive and competitive, compensation structure. So that includes benefits and things like that. Of course, talks a little bit about the creativity that some of these firms, small, medium-sized businesses, are getting into that larger firms can't do. Like, offering stipends for babysitting, I think was one thing that they mentioned. So not to get too far down that rabbit trail, but and not that I'm asking you to offer us a stipend for babysitting, even if, or even, I mean, you might want to do that, and I won't turn it away, but maybe one day. Anyway, Ben, would love to hear your
Look
thoughts
at him
just
asking.
on the.
I'm not asking, but if you want to, like, yeah,
But
go for
I'm
it.
asking. No, I thought that was a pretty compelling babysitting
Yeah.
or compelling benefit. So I
Yeah.
automatically went out and researched jobs that give that as a benefit. So no, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Anyway, Ben, curious on your take, and I won't go into all the other strategies, but just curious on your take on that one as the first
Well,
one
I'm
that they bring up.
curious what just bullet level before Ben
Yeah.
goes. What are the other things that they mentioned?
So the other one, number 2, was leveraging referral programs. So having referral partnerships to be able to get top talent from people who are top talent on your team. Number 3, hire an outsourced HR firm. There are a lot of people who specialize in HR placement, just like we specialize in data analytics as a fractional service for teams. So that's another option. Comprehensive benefits package was number 4, and then tapping into social media just to kind of increase following and increase awareness was the last one that they mentioned. So those are the 5.
Yeah, so first thing I thought of is it kind of ties in with that last one, tapping into social media to create that following. Branding at its core is about getting people to know you and your company more. And so I think number one, kind of like Kate, it surprises me, but I think it's definitely important, right? Because if you can not have to go and find people and have people find you, you're saving a ton of time. You know you're going to get good quality, and there's also a little bit of, you have a little bit more power if people find you as opposed to you reach out to people. So I think that those are all positive things for that job search. So so no, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Cool.
I think it's really at the end of the day just about getting good people, good quality people to find you as opposed to you having to find them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my article. Thought it was interesting just to kind of, I don't know, tie in what's going to be on the horizon for us, hopefully pretty soon, bringing in top talent to do work that we're going to need to do for our clients, and how we might go about recruiting for the best of the best that are out there. So, yeah.
No, I think
Jade,
that's
you want
good.
to go?
Yeah, I think talent acquisition is super important in the marketplace, and you can't, like you said earlier, Tim, like you can't afford to miss if you're a small business. You have to hit on the people that you hire. Otherwise, it can be really painful. The type of pain that a large company can absorb fairly easily,
Yeah.
and they do regularly. But when you're small, you don't have the ability to absorb that as well. So I think that's interesting. And I think, one way, if I was going to think about like what small businesses should take away as far as how they what they do with that information. One way that you can do it on a smaller scale without spending a ton of money in branding and things like that is investing your time in the local community, especially like in, for example, a local university or college. Tim is spending a lot of time with Liberty University. He lives in Lynchburg. That's where he went to school. You're going to be an adjunct professor, is that right, Tim? I think you've got that coming up. Is that for spring semester starting?
Correct. Yeah.
And so like doing things like that, like you could do that if you're a small business in a local community and you've got like a university, college nearby, you could do that and you start to build a reputation in that area of an organization that's involved in the community is doing things. And now you've also created kind of a pipeline of talent, because not only are you tied into the university where you can talk to professors and other people who are going to tell you like which kids are the ones that are really going to be good, but then those kids also know you. They've seen you in class. Maybe they've taken your class. They've heard you. They kind of know what you do. So they're going to naturally be more interested. And, trying to get more involved that way is one way that we've tried to set ourselves up long term for being able to create talent pipelines through university systems. So if you have a small business that is looking for that type of talent, like coming out of college with a specific skill set, that might be one approach that you can take.
Totally.
Ben, what do you got for us?
All right. I kind of the same topic. I saw an article on CNBC. I think this came out this past Saturday. It's talking about new state minimum wage hikes in 2024. So the specific states that it noted were California, Nebraska, Delaware, Maryland, and Hawaii. And the most notable being California is targeting fast food companies, which require McDonald's and Chipotle to pay at least $20 per hour. Politics aside, this obviously is going to have an impact on small business owners, franchisees, and specifically franchisees, but also others that may be employing minimum wage workers, seeing their costs go up, seeing the impact of this, because labor is always a big expense in any small business. I think what a lot of people have said in the past is if we increase the hourly wage, then we're going to have to increase the price of goods. That talks a little bit about that. That companies like McDonald's and Chipotle have already said they're likely to raise prices to counteract the impact of the new law. And then we can create sort of a vicious circle of the prices are raised, now we can't afford it anymore, so we need our wages to go up. And I think that's a common argument. So I guess my question for the group is, what's going to give? What's going to cause this to not be an issue? And how are we going to be able to find a resolution on this, specifically for small business owners? Is there a way that we can make this palatable without having to cause our sales to go down because of additional price costs?
Mm-hmm.
Are there alternatives to just increasing our prices?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's got to be a ceiling eventually, right? And sorry, you go ahead, Kade.
No, go. You start talking.
I was going to say there's got to be a ceiling eventually, right? Like obviously we haven't reached that point because fast food businesses are still in business, right? So I think California, the other ones that you mentioned, are kind of flirting with that, right, Ben? Because the two primary ways you can increase your revenues in this scenario is, number one, increase the price of your food to the customers, or number two, get more volume, right? And everybody's doing everything they can to be able to get more volume in their stores. Like nobody's ever going to turn away patrons at a fast food restaurant. So I guess additional dollars will probably have to be invested into marketing and sales and things like that to be able to bring people in, or maybe even like new products or something like that. Some of these places, especially in the franchise model, are going to have to think creatively as to, within their sphere of influence, how they can be creative to draw new people in, because they are going to have to also, raise the prices on their food for people who are coming in and visiting. So eventually, though, it's going to reach a ceiling where it's like, okay, does it make sense for us to put in a bunch of kiosks instead of paying people to take people's money at these fast food restaurants? And how does that balance with the cooks who are in the back? And how do we manage all that? So it's all a numbers game whenever it comes to this. I feel like, and you guys know me, the government is pretty quick to make decisions and not calculate all of the risks or issues with those decisions. And that's broad swath. That's not just left or right, or that's not just left. It's also on the right side. So that's my opinion. Number one, you either have to raise the prices for your consumers, or number two, you've got to figure out a way to increase, the volume of your consumers to be able to offset the cost. And clearly we haven't reached that ceiling yet. So that's why we're still exploring this idea of increasing minimum wage. That's kind of the opinion that I have.
So first, I love how Ben is always like not to talk politics and then picks topics that very clearly have us wading into
Political.
politics because there's no other way to talk about them. Secondly, the government loves creating problems and then providing solutions to those problems that create more problems. And it's just one of the wonderful things about our government. What's going to give, I believe, was Ben's question. And the answer is the number of jobs is going to give. In a free market with no regulation that dictates how much people get paid, people do a job, they produce some type of good or service. Either they or the company they work for sells that good and service or packages, what they produce with what a couple other people produce and sells that good or service. And then how much they can sell it for dictates how much people are willing to pay for it, dictates what they sell it for, and what they sell it for dictates how much they pay people. And that is that's very simplified version of it, but that's essentially how it works. And when the government says you have to be paid a minimum of $20 per hour to produce this thing, then it has to be sold for an amount that covers that hourly wage, which means the price has to go up to cover that. And eventually there will be a point where people will no longer pay $12 for a Big Mac or $15 for a Big Mac or whatever it ends up being as those things go up. And then when that happens, McDonald's, whether it be through automation, whether it be through robotics, they will figure out a way to produce it for cheaper and not have to pay. And they will have less $20 an hour jobs available. So the people who do work will make a minimum of $20 an hour, but you will have less people who have those jobs available because many of them will have been eliminated, because once you have to price McDonald's food to the point that people will no longer buy it because they can get something a lot better for the same price, then the model is broken and McDonald's is no longer one of the most profitable franchises. And that's true for all of them, right? And so I think the problem with this is what dictating costs, like minimum wage. And just for the record, I think everybody should make a certain amount of money because you need to be able to live. But I also understand the realities of you have to be able to produce something with your labor that is worth more than that. And the market should decide how much you make. And the challenge of balancing those two is that if you dictate it to be so high, then you end up with the cost of everything being so high, which is what leads to the cost of living in a place like California being astronomical compared to the middle of the country. And so I'm not a fan on having minimum wage at all. To be honest, I want people all to make a certain amount of money, but I'm more of a fan of letting the market set the prices based on what people are willing to do. Because if you dictate a minimum wage, what they should have done when they started minimum wage is if they were going to do a minimum wage, they should have created minimum wage, and then they should have bookmarked it against inflation and raised it with inflation, like just an automatic raise that keeps it steady with inflation, so that you gradually raised it over time at the same pace that the cost of goods went up. And then it would have been fairly manageable. But instead, they kept it at a lower level, which if they hadn't had minimum wage for a long time, when it was stuck at like $6 an hour or whatever it was, in all likelihood, without a set minimum wage, companies would have had to have, in an open market, would have had to raise the wages to keep up. But because all the companies had the standard benchmark of minimum wage, they could all just kind of say, well, we pay minimum wage. And there wasn't that competition that would have caused the cost of labor to go up as the cost of goods went up. And so the whole thing has just caused a problem. But the truth is that there's only so high you can raise your prices if you sell something like McDonald's or Chipotle before people won't pay it. And at that point, your business model is broken and all those jobs are going to disappear, and they'll figure out another way to produce those outcomes. And so basically what you're doing by continuing to raise minimum wages on jobs like that is eventually you're going to create an environment where those jobs that pay $10 to $25 an hour that a lot of people need are no longer available. And those low skill jobs that you can make some money in, there's less and less of them available, which means you'll have a large swath of the population who hasn't yet developed enough skills to get a higher paying job, who don't have anything to do to make any money, because the the businesses have been forced to automate away those jobs because they couldn't afford to pay them. So, Ben, I hope that was what you were looking for when you took us down the path, because there's my rant on that.
That was not. I was going in a completely different direction. I was not trying to make that political, but I mean, there's politics to it. Absolutely. What I was
I
thinking
mean,
along the lines of,
you were 100% trying to make it political. Like, I don't know why else you bring that article in.
I will explain what I was trying to get at. So,
Give them a chance.
what I'm thinking of, if I'm a small business owner, is all right. So, if I have the cost of one of my inputs go up, how am I going to balance that? Right. So, it comes down to how do you make profit. So, going back to what Tim said, which I think was exactly on point. If you want to increase your revenues, you can either increase your prices or you can increase your volume. Increasing your prices is one option. It looks like some companies are doing that. Increasing your volume is one option for increasing your revenues. And ways that you could do that, you can look at your marketing, you can look at your sales efforts, you can look at what's getting people in the door, taking a real hard look at your business and seeing what's working to get new customers. And then on the other side, you can also decrease your expenses. So one way is, yes, consolidating a workforce, looking at what's critical there, but also looking at your raw materials, looking at your processes, looking at the data that drives all those pieces and say, where do we have inefficiencies? Where do we have weaknesses? Could we get our raw goods cheaper if we reevaluated our contracts? Could we renegotiate these contracts? So really that's what I was kind of going for. That's what I was thinking along the lines of how can you manage that?
Like, no, I think that's fine. I think this is a real conversation though. Like, that's all like nice flowery language on things that you could do, but here's like the reality, right? Is like, if you are talking about how you're sourcing your stuff, like, oh, let's go renegotiate contracts. Cool, except for the people you source your beef from, the people you source your lettuce from, the people you source your bread from. They all have to pay that $20 an hour minimum wage too. So they're not going to up their prices and then also be like, oh yeah, we'll let you pay less for the contract that you have had as our prices go up, right? And
Yeah.
Same thing if you increase your volume. If you increase your volume, but most of your processes, which that's the talk here with McDonald's, right? If we're using that as an example, most of those processes in making their product is done by people. But now if you increase your volume, that's also assuming that they're not already running close to capacity, which many McDonald's are. But if you do have that ability to increase your volume, well, under their current processes, they have to add people. So it doesn't really fix the problem, right? Because the only way they're built to add people to scale up. So it's still, you might make a little bit more money because you have a smaller margin, but you're getting more volume. So you could potentially make more. But theoretically, if you have to increase your marketing, advertising, and all of those things to get more people, then you're eating up that margin, right? So like, even if you can increase your volume, then the best way to do it is to change your like labor cost to a fixed cost instead of a variable cost that goes up by volume, right? If that's what you're going to do. And again, that means like getting rid of jobs and doing all of those things. But like trying to get your suppliers or people like that to decrease their prices while their prices and their labor costs are going up. Like, I don't think, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but I just don't think that's a winning strategy. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of jobs being eliminated because like you can't continually have the prices of everything go up and try to not raise your prices or not cut back your expenses, with payroll being one of the primary expenses for every business. So like those are going to be the second and third level effects of some of these things, is that jobs are going to be eliminated. A lot of things are going to be automated and prices are going to go up. And then the prices going up are going to lead to people saying, oh, well, you can't live in California on $20 an hour. We need to raise it again. And then it's going to happen again. And then pretty soon the jobs that typically would be like 30, 40 bucks an hour and would be pretty good jobs for people to make a living wage a few years ago, those will start to be the ones that we're talking about in this same lens. That's my opinion. People are free to disagree with it, but that's what I think. If you're a small business owner, what you should take away from that is, what I would take away with that is try to eliminate as much low skill labor as possible if you can. Now, if you're in like a construction company, if you're in something like that, obviously that's not possible, right? That's what you sell. But if you're in a business like ours, if you're in a business where you have a mix of high and low skill labor, I would say try to focus your payroll expenses on high skill labor that you have to have. Try to use technology, automation, robotics to automate away a lot of those so that you can decrease your costs. Because if you cannot raise your prices any more than you have to while everyone else is raising your prices, that's going to give you a competitive advantage over many of the competitors who are going to be raising their prices. But it sucks because that means you have less jobs available. Like it's a catch-22. But that's kind of, in my opinion, one of the realities of the situation.
Yeah, I feel like another takeaway in that is for small business owners, make sure, like Kate was talking about, make sure all of your people are working to the absolute top of their license too, right? If you're making sure that you're maximizing the value that you're getting out of each person based on their individual skill level, that's the best you can do, right? They can always go to market and figure out, okay, could I make a better salary at another job? And that's up to the employee. Like that's just a freedom that they have in their work, right? But at the end of the day, making sure that the services that you sell, if you're backing those services up with people who are working to the top of their license, being compensated well, hopefully for what they're doing, that's really another thing that you can do to kind of combat that as a small business owner.
I'm going to give Ben
Kate,
a chance to talk because I've just been on a roll for a bit.
You have. No, what I was going to say is I think another thing that we're looking at too is if you look at the states I mentioned, California, Nebraska, Delaware, Maryland, and Hawaii. 4 of those are very traditional blue states. One is more of a traditional red state. Actually, I'd say definitely a traditional red state. I think what you're going to see is what happened, and I don't want to say I know the extent of this, but when 90s, 2000s companies offshoring, taking a lot of their processes offshore, but we may not see offshore, we may see out of state. So when you're something like a McDonald's, obviously you can't really do a whole lot at your store because you're not going to put your store in another state, and that makes no sense. But you may start sourcing your meat from Wyoming as opposed to California, or you may look for cheese from I don't know if a good example of that, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like you look for lower cost areas as opposed to higher cost, and I think you're seeing that too. I know I live in Southwest Virginia, not in a rural area, but Southwest of me is very rural. A lot of companies are trying to move things to those kinds of areas, to places like West Virginia, to get lower costs of everything. Really, labor is one piece, but looking at other pieces as well. So I think that's something that we'll see more and more of as a result of these kinds of things. That's another opportunity for small business owners. Look 100%. At where your costs are coming from.
There's been a lot of companies migrating to places where they're going to find some of those favorable conditions. If you look at Texas over the last couple of years, it has blown up population-wise. Since COVID, Florida has blown up population-wise, right? Like these are real trends that are happening, and many of them have to do with businesses and how business leaders are growing or building their businesses. I'll give you another little caveat, and I think this plays into my article as well, so I think it's a good transition. I went to a small business expo, which is a national convention that happens all around the country. There's about one a month, I think, that they do in different parts of the country. There's one in Dallas a month ago, and I went to it. And I was down there, and I'll tell you, when I was walking around the floor and seeing all the exhibitors, the 2 most common things that I saw were offshore some type of talent. Could be executive assistant, could be accounting, could be finance, could be whatever, to someplace like the Philippines. There was a ton of exhibitors that was what they were selling, right? Is, hey, get an executive assistant in the Philippines, get this in the Philippines, get a developer, get whatever. And then the other one was like AI. Like that's the other hot thing right now, and that was all over as well. And I think what that tells us
your money.
To nexting your money. Yeah, that's a funny story that I'll actually, that wouldn't be bad. If we have time, I'll tell it here in a second. But like, it's one of those things where offshoring skilled labor is becoming a really big thing in smaller businesses. That's been a thing in the corporate world for a long time. If you don't have like certain regulatory or risks associated with stuff, that's been a thing in large corporations for a long time, but now small businesses is becoming a lot more common. And then obviously, how do people leverage AI, and how do people leverage these emerging technologies to reduce their expenses? Because everyone they need talent, they're trying to get talent, but they can't afford talent. And so they're trying to figure out how to get talent cheaper. And a lot of times offshoring is the answer. And that leads into what I want to bring up, because it's the AI piece. So I am subscribed to a newsletter that is called the Patent Drop. And basically what it does is it monitors new patent applications, and then sits out a newsletter that says like, hey, this company registered for this patent, just to kind of give you a preview of what's coming. And this was on Monday. Monday's edition talked about JP Morgan filed a patent application for a system to provide automated data science as a service to businesses. I'm reading from the patent drop right now. If JP Morgan clients have access to a lot of data but no technical expertise, this system will put data analysis and predictive modeling at their fingertips. JP Morgan noted that organizations can collect and create millions of data sets on any given day, which can require manual analysis. This affects an information technology team's ability to respond to an issue, as it takes a long time to process a ticket. The company said, in addition, the processing can be inaccurate and involve a number of laborious, manual, repetitive steps. So basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically, they're trying to create an as-a-service model of machine learning and AI models, where you could basically sign up for it, drop a bunch of your data into it, and they would digest, analyze, and then model your data to create predictive models and things like that. And, one of the common pitfalls of data science or machine learning that we talk about is like, you need specific use cases, right? You can't just like decide we're going to use AI and then try to figure out how you're going to use it. But it can be really valuable if you have specific use cases. I thought it was interesting that Jamie Dimon, who's the CEO of JP Morgan, and if anybody doesn't know that, said in their annual shareholders letter that they have more than 300 use cases for AI in practice inside of their organization that they're already using, which is super interesting. Obviously, some of those like fraud and risk are going to be specific to the banking industry, but there's probably a lot in marketing, prospecting, customer experience that are going to be applicable to other places. So what I take away from this kind of goes into this broader conversation that we've been talking about around minimum wage, expenses, all of those things. And that is, like, if you're a small business, like, if you need something, if you need to expand your capacity, I think traditionally the answer was to go hire somebody. And I don't think that should be your answer anymore, at least not the first answer. Like, I think there are too many options out there and more on the horizon like this in the evolving technology landscape, in the evolving marketplace, in the evolving climate. If you are a business leader and you are like, man, we really need somebody to do X, or we need to do X, and you don't have the skill sets or the capacity in your business to do that, traditionally, I think you would have looked to hire somebody first. And now I think you should look, is there AI, is there technology? This is a specific problem we need to solve. Is there something that can help us solve it? Is there a way that we could contract it out on like an Upwork or something like that? So we're paying, or maybe a fractional CFO type offer, right? Or a fractional services offer. Is there a third party that we could use that would be cheaper than hiring somebody who could deliver that value? Or could we potentially hire somebody but offshore it to like the Philippines or something, but get the desired effect that way? There are so many options now before you just say, we're going to go hire a $60, $70, $80,000 a year employee to do this work, right? Because that, you don't, once you hire somebody, you really don't want to lay them off. You really want to be able to maintain that payroll, and you're kind of giving yourself a higher floor on your expenses. And cash flow management is one of the most challenging things if you're building a small business. And so in my opinion, that's kind of my takeaway just in general on this ever evolving climate is like, if you have a gap that you need to fill, there are so many ways you could potentially fill it now that maybe traditionally you would have looked to hire somebody to fill that gap immediately. And I think looking to hire somebody to fill that gap should now be like your third, fourth, fifth option. Tim, what do you think about that?
I think small businesses have to be careful, though. You're right, Cade. Like traditionally, that would have been the thing that they would do, right? Is go out and find a skill set that they don't have to accomplish a task that they need to be able to accomplish, right? Now that systems are becoming far more intuitive, right? That's certainly appealing, but small business leaders have to be careful that they're not trying to jam a square peg into a round hole by bringing in a technology for the sole purpose of fixing an issue they have. There has to be some sort of obviously business need for that technology to be brought in for it to actually work effectively. I guess what I'm trying to say is, people talk about AI a lot, right? They talk about machine learning, they talk about robotics process automation, and they want to do that stuff in their business where they might not know exactly even what that means, but they want to do it because it sounds cool. So they make business decisions to be able to fit the needs of a specific technology that they want to use, as opposed to leveraging a technology that can really support the business with the way that they've designed it in order to ultimately grow from there, right? So I would just kind of, based on what you said, I'd kind of caution small business leaders to not jump the gun on just going out and paying for a technology, because usually what happens in that scenario, is that you just have additional expense. You pay for a technology that you don't have the right skill set at your organization to leverage effectively and get the results that you're after. You need to make sure that you're equipped first, and then bring in the technology to be able to accomplish what it is you're trying to accomplish. Once you have the right skill set and it's very clear that this is the way that you can accomplish that by purchasing additional technology, and there's a clear ROI with that. Because if you don't do that ROI analysis beforehand, chances are you're going to spend more money for a flashy technology, not use it to its full potential, and still have the same difficulties you've been having before.
Yeah, I think that's, and I want to give Ben to talk because we got to wrap up here in a couple, but like, I'm not advocating, for the record, for people to just jump into new technologies. You 100% need to be mature enough to actually get an ROI from new technologies, and B, have a specific value prop that you're going to get from that technology. So I echo everything that Tim says, but I think it's a balance, right? Like the answer isn't to just throw yourself at a new technology, but it's not just to hire a new employee either. It's to find like to the specific problem that you're trying to solve. How can we be mature enough as an organization to solve this problem in the most cost-effective way possible? And there are just more potential solutions out there today than there ever has been before.
100% agree. Yeah.
I was going to echo what Cade was saying, that I think we work with a lot of companies where they have very specific needs that they need met, whether it's we need dashboards, we need to understand into this particular aspect. And I know us as an organization, for those who don't know us, none of us are marketers. None of us are great at sales. So we have people to fill very specific needs that we don't hire completely, that we contract out. And, that's
shout out to Kyle in the Courtside group.
That's right, for sure.
So that's the kind of stuff that I think is more of the future, right? Looking more at how can we fill this very specific need at a lower cost, at a lower risk than hiring somebody entirely. I think especially for small businesses where you have a much lower risk tolerance to hire somebody indefinitely, having that, temporary, obviously I'm biased because it's how we typically operate, but month to month kind of engagement, right? Even if it's a 6-month engagement, that's less risk than hiring somebody full time when you factor everything in. So I think that's definitely the way things are starting to move.
That's another thing I would say, and I would add to this, like, give yourself flexibility as much as you can in your expense model. One of the big regrets that I have from early in building our business was I got talked into purchasing a technology that certainly is valuable, but we way overpaid for it. And I signed a 2-year contract on it. And it causes issues because now you have this financial obligation that, is it valuable? Yeah, but it's not worth nearly as much as what we paid for it. And there are alternatives that are a lot better. but I thought because all the big companies use this specific solution that I needed that one instead of one of the more cost-effective options. And given the information that I had at the time, it wasn't the worst decision in the world. But the problem was the 2-year deal, right? Is like it locked us in and didn't give us some flexibility with that later on down the road. And so as much as you can do things that don't require overly long-term commitments and allow you to have flexibility on a month-to-month or at least a quarter-to-quarter basis in your expenses, that gives you the ability to adapt and adjust more effectively as a business. But on the flip side of that, as a business, you want to sign people to long-term deals. You want that security, right? And that's where the negotiation and the art of the deal comes in trying to figure out how you can build a business. I think that's actually a Donald Trump book. So scratch out my quote on that.
And you gave Ben grief for bringing politics into this discussion.
I didn't mean to do that. I forgot it was his book until I said that. But anyway,
it's all good.
But that's the idea, right? Is like, how do you build resilient revenue sources for yourself, but give yourself as much flexibility if you need it in the future as possible, in order to be adaptable to the environment. So that's kind of the final takeaway I would have there.
Love it.
Perfect. We're gonna wrap it up. A little bit shorter session today. I'll save my 10x your money story from the small business convention for next time, but I do think that would be hilarious to tell. Yeah. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, you're a brave soul, and we appreciate it.
Yep.
Love it. Appreciate it, everybody. See you guys later.